Welcome to another episode of Unity Beats. Today we're going to see how you can set up UI elements without them triggering their callback functions. And this is very important because with UI elements, it's all about the data. You got to display the data, you got to get the data back, and when you push the data back into the UI elements, you don't want them to trigger your events whenever your event listeners. I'll show you and give you an example here. So we have a couple of elements here. We have a full screen toggle, sort of a poor man's options menu, resolution drop down with a few values here, and I've already pre-created these, and I've pre-created a script. It looks like this. So there's a couple of public functions. So there's an on toggle full screen and then an on set resolution, which we have, or I have, already connected to my toggle button. So I came in here and I said add, or I could just do this one real quick, add, and then I'll drag the source or the target game object, and then anything that is, any component that is on there, I can get the public functions from them and call them. Something that is interesting in options menu here, you have a bunch of different things down here, but there is our on-set resolution and our on-toggle full screen. Well, if I select this one, then I get this checkbox, which means I can only set it one way or the other, but I want to basically send this method whether or not my checkbox is checked for this little guy. And that's where this dynamic comes in. And you see dynamic bool, which basically allows us to toggle any of these things. So we have this on toggle full screen, and you see the checkbox goes away because now when this checkbox is changed, it will send the state of that to this function. And likewise, I have the same thing for my drop down as well, and that is again also the dynamic. And in this case, for the Dropbox, it is, or the drop down, it is an integer, and it will tell me which index has been selected. Great! So that's fantastic, right? Let's push play just to verify it works, or verify it works. So I'll toggle that. So see, I get a debug message to toggle on and off. Then I can change this, and I also get set resolution index. So that's all we're doing right now, and we're just calling these. Now, and you can see I also have connected these up because, as we said before, this is all about data. I've already pre-connected them by dragging them in like that. It's all about pushing data into these UI elements and pulling them out. But when you push them in, push data in, such as, let's say we want to set the toggle is on. Let's say we want to set it to false, because right now you see it is defaulted to true. Say we want to get data from some source and we want to set it to false. We could even set it to true. It doesn't really matter. This particular effect will be the same in those. So let's push play. So we're setting it to false, which it goes, but it also, what's this? It also sends that on changed event. Well, we don't want it to send the on-changed event whenever we're pushing data into it. We don't want that. Now, some of you might have done this in the past, which is updating data or something like that. You make a bool like this, and then you come down here and you say updating data equals true. Do all your data updating in here, and then you say updating data is false. And then you could come down here in here, you could say if updating data, then just return. It just doesn't feel good. It works. It just doesn't feel like a very, I don't know, it doesn't feel right. So I'm gonna give you another option. That is an option. I'll give you a couple of more options. Now, turns out that these Unity events, by the way, these particular Unity events, this is all just a Unity event, and it's a Unity event with one parameter. And in the case of the full screen or the toggle button, it is a a Boolean. And then in the case of the resolution dropdown, it is an integer, specifically an integer 32. Basically, it is a form of the Unity event. It looks like a Unity event of T, basically. Where is the Unity event? Well, never mind. Anyway, so there turns out to be a way to say, take that event, so that the event is on value changed, and we can do something. We can say, set persistent listener state. Let me show you this real quick. So on all these events, you have this little section right here, the target object, and then you have the component and the function that you want, or method that you want it to call, or property even, because if you look in these dynamics, if you have a public property that is the same, you can actually use that. And then you have this little box, off, editor and runtime only. What happens if we turn that off? So I just turned it off. And then you'll see that, which one did I turn off? I turned the wrong one off, didn't I? Yeah. Let's turn off the toggle. I bet you can guess what happens if you turn it off. Yes, indeed, small cat. I have a small cat here. Let me interrupt this program briefly, show you my small cat. Hello, small cat. Tell the Unity Bits audience hello. Hello, hello, I am a cat. Excellent, very nice. Now, let's continue. So, if we have turned this event off, and maybe you didn't see that, but I'll push play, and our toggle turns off, we don't get the event. And we don't get the event at all because that event has been turned off. You see it has two others, and normally this is what you set it to. Actually, I've never set one of my events to editor and runtime. It's always been runtime only. So whenever we have that turned on, we're runtime only, we can actually turn that off here. So we can set the persistent listener state, and you see it has an index. So it's asking for which of the listeners, because remember, we can add multiple listeners here, bunches and bunches of listeners, potentially. So it's asking for which one we want to set. We want to set 0. And then let's add Unity events so that we don't have to have a long thing. So we want to turn this off like that. And then we want to do what we want to do with our data to push it into that UI element, and then we can turn it back on. And that's assuming that we have runtime, we're doing runtime only. Now I would think that you should be able to, you can't, but ideally you would want to get the listener state and store it and then restore that here instead of just assuming it's runtime only. But come on. I mean, I've never used anything but runtime only, so your mileage may vary. So if we do this, push play, then we should not get our message, but our checkbox has been turned off. We turn it on, we get our message. So we've successfully done that. So that is one method of doing it. Let's see another method. That's kind of messy, right? Oh, wait, I want to show you something else. That's great, but what if we have no listeners? What happens? We get error because there are no listeners, and yet we are saying we want to change the persistent listener state of number 0. No worries, because we can handle that. All we have to do is toggle.onValueChanged, which is that Unity event, and then we can say get persistent event count. Then it gets worse. Then we can say, okay, let's loop through all of our listeners, and instead of 0 now, this becomes I for our for loop, and we'll do the same thing. We'll turn them back on down here. Now, come back here, and we remove this. This will still work because the list was empty, but we know that now. So we have 1, and even if we have multiple, so we can set 2 up with the exact same callback, and it still works because it will turn all of them off and then set the value, then turn them all back on. See, if I click that, now we get 2 calls to that function. Great, wonderful. But this is blah. This is yucky to have to do that for every single UI element. Well, what we could do is we could make a static. We could say something like set event state, static void set event state, and then we could say unity event of type T, and it always gets me. I do this every time. Like that, and we could say event, and then we could say action, where you actually just use it. Action, where you can actually set, add a set callback so that this gets called so that you can set your data. Like so. And you can imagine what would be in here. And then it would be something like this. Set event state, toggle.onValueChanged. And then we would say the lambda and say toggle.isOn equals false. And that would work. Basically, we would just grab all of this stuff. So that's method 1, too big and nasty. And this would be method 2. And instead of toggle value changed, it would be so. And we would say if set callback not equal to null, then call set callback. It's okay. Still decent chunk of code, but that's, that's all right. Well, let's do it one better. Let's make it into an extension. How about it? How about it? Let's make this into an extension, because it's too much fun, right? So we'll take this little fella right here, and we'll say public static. We'll say, instead of Unity event, we'll say this. And then what does that look like? Instead of doing it like this, we would say toggle.onEvent or onValueChanged. And then we would say set event state. And then all we would do is stick this callback in like this. Yes, indeed, young cat. You are correct. And that's the solution, of course, that I like the best. It just feels cleaner. We'll just prove that it works. We don't get it, and then we're all good. And of course, that's easily extendable to our dropdown. We can say dropdown.onValueChanged, set event state. And I'm going to copy this stuff, and then we'll say dropdown.value equals, let's set it to 1. And we also need to refresh the shown value for the dropdown. So this should turn from 1920 to 1280 by 720, and no event occur. And so it does. But yet if we select one, our events are back on. So there you have it. Ladies and gentlemen, and who else might be watching, that is a way that you can get your events, turn off basically the events, a Unity event, whenever you're changing some of its value. A handy dandy extension. While admittedly is a decent amount of code, it's certainly an option, and it lets you set that data without actually triggering those events. And until next time, be good.